Event is held under the gracious patronage of Shree Cement Limited as their CSR initiative. Today we are privileged to have with us Dr. R. Balasubramaniam, grace the occasion and give us the opportunity to understand his experiences and reflections with today's moderator and my fellow Ehsaas woman, Priyanshi Patel. Before we dive into the conversation, I'll talk a little bit about PKF and the woman behind it. Prabha Khaitan Foundation, as we all know, is a Kolkata-based non-profit trust that celebrates our rich artistic, cultural, and literary heritage. The foundation honors the invaluable legacy bestowed upon us within India and across the globe through author meets, book launches, boutique festivals, and performances of singers, dancers, and theatre performers under its distinguished initiatives. We are elated to share that the three-time Grammy Award winner Ricky Cage, the man behind the anthem and the signature collar tune of Prabha Khaitan Foundation, has curated 12 amazing musical pieces to score across video invites of events and social media platforms. This August, the music of the month is celebration of diversity with hip-hop. Hip-hop music is said to have originated in the West, but every nation has its own equivalent of hip-hop. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Balasubramaniam. Dr. R. Balasubramaniam is a development scholar, author, public policy advocate, leadership trainer known for his pioneering development work with rural and tribal people in Karnataka. He's a physician by qualification and he has masters in public administration from the Harvard Kennedy School at the Harvard University. His living habits were greatly influenced by the teachings of Swami Vivekananda, and at the age of 19, he founded the Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement based on the principles of Ahimsa, Satya, Seva, and Tyag. He is currently the president of the organization. He has spent the last 30 years of his life in the service of the rural and tribal poor in the forests of India. Dr. R. Balasubramaniam is also a recipient of numerous state and national awards. Many international, national, and state committees have counted upon his immense experience in planning and executing rural development programs. He is also an advisory member of various organizations working in the fields of health and education in our country. He teaches and lectures regularly at the prestigious institutions around the world on leadership, and he was a distinguished Frank Rhodes Professor at Cornell University. He has also authored more than 5 books, and he runs a leadership workshops for corporates, NGOs, and the government. He is currently researching into the leadership lessons that ancient Indian books and philosophies contain. Now I'll hand it over to our moderator, Ms. Priyanshi Patel, to start the conversation. And please put your phones on silent. Thank you.
Shaneel, for such a great introduction. You know, while I was hearing the introduction and along with that, when I was doing my little bit of research, I did not know how in less than an hour I can do justice to summing up everything that you have done. You know, with Prabha Khaitan Foundation, when we talk about stories, and in Write Circle especially, we reflect on the stories behind the stories. I felt, let's begin in terms of what is the story behind your rich life.
The story is possibly the story of any typical Indian middle-class young person 40 years ago. Where, coming from the city of Bangalore, I had never seen an Indian village even. And the only aspirations that your parents give you is do medicine or do engineering. It's limited to that. And those were the days when we only had 5 IITs. Every other engineering college is called an IIT today, but those days it was different. And so my dream was to get into an IIT. But IIT didn't dream to take me in, so I didn't get into it. Very disappointed. Those days we didn't have entrance exams and all the messes that we're seeing today. So we just went in with marks, and I had 99.67% in my, what we call PCM, physics, chemistry, maths. And so I thought I could get into the next tier of engineering colleges. Both my siblings abroad, youngest, that was the pathway, right? And so I didn't get into what was called RECs, those days, regional engineering colleges. Now they're NITs. Computer science was introduced just that year, and there's only 1 seat for general merit in that college. So I was 1 mark less than the perfect mark, and so the guy who got the perfect mark got in that seat. So I was waitlisted 1, very disappointed. Just joined some engineering college in Bangalore, and we didn't have an anti-ragging law. So the first day I went to college, I was so badly ragged, I didn't have the courage to go back the second day. That is all the story. But then, a typical middle class family, you have to do something. You don't have money to go sit in a movie theater. There were not Netflix or Amazons those days, so you had to go to a theater to see a movie. Nor did you have the courage to stay back at home, because a homemaker mother is the most intelligent woman I can ever think of, right? And she would easily figure out that this guy is playing around. So to look serious and important, I did the next best thing, which was free of cost. Besides the engineering college which I had attended in Bangalore was the Ramakrishna Mission. So the gates were open. I just thought, let me spend some time sitting out, loafing around. I just spent some little time there. A few days of doing that, I would go back home in the afternoon, tell my mother, college has just started, so half day class. And that excuse would go for 15 days, right? And after that, you got to have a full day class and you got to do something else. But the ashram would close in the afternoon at 12:30 and open only at 4 o'clock. But luckily for me, some of the monks who were going around the place suddenly realized this guy is coming every day. So there could only be two explanations for my being there every day. One, I was a potential monk, or I was possibly a vagabond going around and there are lovely fruit trees and I'm trying to steal some fruits. So just to prove my sincerity and convince them that, you know what, I'm not a thief, I went into their library, which was at the entrance, and spent the next 2 months, possibly the best years of my life, reading the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. It was in 8 volumes those days, and I was a young, impressionable 17-year-old. And that changed my life. 2 books especially. One is called His Call to the Nation, and the second is To the Youth of India. And 2-3 sentences of his, which I think sparked me off. And if I can repeat that, one, he says, I call every young man a traitor, who having been educated at people's expense pays not the least heed to them. And I thought, wow, I don't want to be a traitor to my country, I want to do something. And at 17, every young person is a socialist. A declared socialist believes that he waves a magic wand, the world will be equal. It took me 40 years to realize it's not. But the next statement which really inspired me was, Swamiji also writes, it's a very powerful statement. He says, in the Indian context, you see, this context was more than 100 years ago when he said this. He said, I do not believe in a God or religion which cannot wipe away the widow's tears or bring a piece of bread to the orphan's mouth. So at 17, all of us are atheists also. We are confused. So I believe that, okay, this is the God I want to know, this is the religion I want to have. And I come home inspired. We actually had telegrams those days. Today, many of you would recognize it, but younger population wouldn't even know what a telegram is. If you say, the government send me an email, they may believe me, but a telegram they won't know. Which said, join Mysore Medical College. And I had no idea wanting to be a doctor. I thought it's a divine sign. This is my life destined to be something different. And so I chose to join Mysore Medical College. And that was 1982. 84, I felt I can't just carry on with this. I had series of, again, sub-stories there. And so I have to do something. I can't wait. And I started the Vivekananda Youth Movement, and my life has been different.
That's phenomenal. When I think back about my story, I did have all of these seeds for leadership, activism, doing something for the country. But I believe at 17, I was getting more influenced, of course, with books, but as well intoxicants. So I think, there must have been something within you that set the stage for everything that's to come. So when you reflect back on that period with everything that you've accomplished till now, was there a particular incident or except of these books, something that drove you to get to this point today?
From the perspective of writing, I'll limit it to that because there's so many stories I can speak about. See, living with indigenous communities was possibly the greatest gift that I've had for myself. Because when you go in from an urban setting to rural India, it's like a American coming down to India, the white man's burden. He thinks India is poor, it's full of snake charmers, and I have to save this world. Right? I went in with the same arrogance into this tribal colony, thinking that I'll be the next Albert Schweitzer and the Nobel Prize is just around the corner and we can do it. At 22, when you actually believe, you can change the world. 2 incidents really changed my life. And one is a very powerful incident. It took me a long time to write it in my book, one of my earlier books, and this is actually my ninth book. I think that bio was a little older, so maybe it's 5 books at that time. The incident that happened was I was not getting accepted by the community at all. And I was a university ranker, I was a topper. So I thought, I have given so much. I didn't go abroad like my siblings, and I've come to the forest, and these guys are not even responding to me as a physician. I thought they'll welcome me, garland me, and say, oh my God, God has come here. And they just didn't care a damn about my presence. And you know, our existence and the legitimacy of existence comes from identities others give us. That's an unfortunate tragedy. Like, you know, if you don't have a Kaitan Foundation to give you legitimacy, this event is not going to happen. All of us, it's just the reality of life. And my legitimacy I saw came from sick people. And only if I responded to sickness would I be recognized as a doctor. It was a very strange enlightenment for me. And tribals were unwilling to see themselves as sick people, so they never bothered to see me as a doctor. And that was very painful to my intellectual ego. Oh, I've given up so much and these guys are not falling sick. So one day, I heard that one chieftain's daughter was pregnant. I thought, wow, this is my opportunity to prove actually I can be useful. And I decided I'm going to deliver this woman. And I loved obstetrics. So in another world, I would have been an obstetrician, but in this world, I married an obstetrician. So that's the next best thing I could do. So I just went and I went to the hut. And the Ejaman, we call him the Ejaman, the chieftain, he was not there. And that woman was there. I requested her to come out. Then I realized she wasn't a woman. She was a 14-year-old girl. And in tribal communities those days, which has changed now, there was nothing, there's no concept of institutionalized marriage. You just live together and you get pregnant, that's it. And she was pregnant with that baby, and the first child, that's primi gravida, she was fully pregnant, and I examined her and I knew she was in labor. I thought, my professor of obstetrics had told me, a good obstetrician understands watchful expectancy. He said, don't interfere with nature, she'll do everything, you take the credit. And if somebody pays you, take the bill also, you'd say. But I thought, okay, I'm not able to do something. But it excited me, and I was very ashamed of that excitement, that she's only 14, she's a high-risk pregnancy. So I'm going to really be establishing myself as a doctor now, if I deliver her safely. But it was early labor, it was 6:30 in the evening. It's India's Project Tiger, Project Elephant area where I lived. So tigers and leopards would come in the evening. So I didn't want to be some animal supper. So I came back home. Next morning, very early in the morning, I thought the textbook says 24 hours for delivery. It's hardly 12 hours, so it'll take the 12 hours. Let me go check her up tomorrow morning. Next morning, as I was walking, I still remember Aunt Puttamma. She told me, where are you going so early? And that is Asia's largest elephant corridor, that belt. She said, you will get trampled because the Kabini River flows there. Now it's in spate because of the Wayanad. We are just the other side of Wayanad. I said, don't go there. No, I said, no, I have to see this child. She said, no, she delivered last night itself. I was tremendously disappointed. Why couldn't this girl follow the textbook? No, I want to deliver and prove I am God, and then she delivers herself. What a tragedy. But I thought I got to do something. So I went to her house, and in traditional tribal custom, you just don't enter the colony without the chieftain's permission. And you don't enter the house without it's a matriarchal, matrilineal society, that particular tribe, without the woman's permission. So I was standing at the hut, the door of the hut, can't even call it a door, the opening of the hut, and telling this young girl to come out and show me a baby at least. So I thought, let me put some eye drops to the eyes and we used to have gentian violet those days for the umbilical stump. Nowadays, medical students don't know what it is. I said, let me do that and come back. I kept asking her to come out and she was refusing to. I could hear her inside. I could hear the little whimpering of the baby newborn, but she was refusing to come out. It's after all 8 by 10 hut. You can hear what's happening inside. So I was getting frustrated, and finally in frustration I screamed and said, if you don't come out, I'm going to get into your house and see the baby anyway. And then that child screamed. And that is in my book, Voices from the Grassroots, I write the voice I can still hear. And Madhi was her name, and she screamed out saying, please don't come in, I have nothing to wear. She was completely naked. And that child had delivered her own baby the previous night, and while delivering the placenta, had soiled the only sari she was having. She had washed it in the middle of the night, put it on the roof of the hut to dry, and only if the sun came out, she could cover herself up again. This is 1987. I was completely shattered. I said, this is not the life I came here to be part of. I'll possibly go abroad like my sister and brother and stay there. And this is not something I can take. At 22, you're not prepared. You don't know what to do. And that shook me completely. And I said, this is not what I chose to do also. I can't take this. But then Swami Vivekananda is magical. In one of the places he writes, I'm so powerful in my thinking, if I enter through a pore of your body, I can never leave you out. I can never get out of you. I think that's when I realized this is the God or religion he was talking about. And his guru Ramakrishna Paramahamsa says, Shiva Jnane Jiva Seva. I said, if I truly have to recognize God, I should worship this God in this young girl. And as long as there are Madhis in this country alive, this is going to be my life. And that's what I've done in different ways. It's expanded in different ways. That's my life. It's a very painful story, so sorry if I'm emotional, but it's still. And the happy part of the ending is that child which was born that day, studied in my school, graduated, had a baby. She refused to get married till she was 20. Had a child. Unfortunately, the child was born with an imperforate anus. And the baby would have died. A classmate of mine who practices pediatric surgery in Bangalore drove down at breakneck speed, operated in my hospital, and the child is an adult now, the grandchild. So, and because my wife delivered her Madhi's daughter, she named it after my wife. And so the good news is a lot of good things also happen.
Wow. That story definitely deserves a round of applause. In the audience, we've got a lot of young people, some of them from around the world, who are here to work on grassroots levels. So I believe this story, this entire passion, is definitely going to inspire all of them. Moving on, you decided to post that, also get into writing, you're teaching. So from all of these various roles that you have, which one has been the most significant in shaping you today?
What do you think it is? One of my colleagues in my office is here, and Ankit is sitting there. Every time I get frustrated with them or with the government or with everybody, I say, I'm going to my forest. So that should answer your question. Living with indigenous communities has been the best time of my life. The police had come to arrest me. I was fighting the cause, and by the time I'd organized the women, we had built self-help groups. And when police came to arrest me, 3,000 women surrounded me. And here, within 15 years of my going there, a situation where I thought I'm protecting the women, I was not who's protecting whom. And they told the police, you touch our doctor, we'll beat you up and come to jail with him. So you never get back those moments, that love. Even now, if I go back to the forest, they always complain, oh, there's a mobile phone, they call me and fire me now. There's a special bond and relationship with my own children who are now mothers and women and all that. They'll simply pick up the phone, fire me and say, you're not come here in 3 months, what the hell are you doing in Delhi? That's the kind of language they have. And in my book also, it's very nice to say Bill Gates and Anand Mahindra and all these people have written endorsements. But what most people will not notice is a name called Meenakshi there. She's one of my own children, a tribal girl, a Jenukurba girl, who decided to be an entrepreneur and runs her own ragi-based food product unit. And she has also written a blog for this. And that's what makes the book special for me. And all my books are only tribal stories and tribal chieftains writing endorsements. And so that is the life I always want to go back to. So hopefully the Prime Minister will let me go now, and then I'll go back to where I belong.
Wow. So when you spoke about living with indigenous people and communities, what comes to my mind is being with nature. From all my research, you've done some phenomenal work on leadership and how you teach in the most prestigious universities. In the Western ways that, including me, I've been taught about leadership is to learn, to do more experiential things, to read more. So that entire thought process is very different. Would you say staying with nature in the most natural way of life taught you more about leadership and people than the other context, the modern way of looking at education?
I would definitely say yes, an emphatic yes to this, which I didn't recognize it. When I was living with people, you don't really appreciate something that you have till you actually don't have it. And that's what happened to me. I was in the search for so-called knowledge to solve people's problems. That took me to Beach Pilani for my MPhil, to Harvard for my studies. But I never found answers. Then it suddenly struck me, the answers are always there. It's just that I didn't know how to ask the questions. And to just explain what I'm saying, uh, uh, the elephants would come and destroy all the crops that we would grow. So one day I thought a great thought and said I should do something which is different. So I was speaking to one of the Ejmanas, Kempaya. He was a great mentor of mine, I could call him that, in leadership. And I said, I'm frustrated. Whatever we try to do in agriculture, the elephants are feeding it off, and people are frustrated. They're not getting any money, so I'm giving up. He never answered anything. He said, why don't you try something which elephants don't know about? So, wow, such a commonsensical answer. So we wanted to know what do elephants don't know. Elephants don't know cabbage because tribals themselves did not know cabbage. And they would call it in the local language foreign crop. No, and so I thought, let's grow cabbage. And we grew cabbage and elephants didn't figure it out. Elephants and wild boars locally for 1 year didn't figure it out. They figured out the next year. And so we had a bumper crop and I was thrilled. Wow, it worked. So loaded it in a lorry and my colleague took it to and in India even today, that's why it's a tragedy that we didn't get a farm laws through. The farmers are not the real beneficiaries of their hard work. It's the mafia in between, the typical trader mafia. The previous day I had checked in Mysore, city of Mysore, the cost of cabbage was 6 rupees a kg those days. I thought, wow, I hit a bumper crop. Poverty is gone and all these dreams. And next day we take it and they'll only buy it in the night. And the mafia is so strong, the fellow buying onions will not buy potato. The fellow dealing with potato will not deal with cabbage. So you can't, it's a monopolistic market. You have to give to only one guy. And this guy said he'll give me 30 paise a kg. So we had no cell phones, no telephones. My colleague could not. So he was so frustrated. He said, let's just dump the crop on the street and drive the lorry over it and go back. The tribal stopped him and said, let's distribute it to all the old age homes and anathalayas here and we'll go back. But finally they sold it because they want to cover the diesel cost. So he drove the truck back. I was frustrated. He was frustrated. Evening I was sitting very sad. This Ejmana would come every evening to talk to me. And that evening he said, why are you so sad? And I said, see what happened. I thought I've completely changed the course of destiny for these people and nothing has happened. He said, oh, that's the problem with you urban people, he said. City people, that's his language. You always measure life by money you make. How stupid are you? Look at what you gained from the whole thing. I said, I didn't know, I didn't understand. He said, see, you bought a small seed from Mysore, put it in the soil, and the way you saw God performing himself every day there's magic. Enjoy it. So in one sentence he said, neither are you the doer nor are you the enjoyer. Doership and enjoyership is not yours. Just go with it, be with it, live in the moment of time. Now my book, I write about the power of now in this. I talk about transcending enjoyership and doership. Kempaya taught me that. That's what the Bhagavad Gita talks about. If Krishna says it in Bhagavad Gita, we build a temple. If Kempaya tribal says it, what do tribals know? They are illiterate people. So he started my journey of leadership. And that's how, and every day was an incident like this for me, some learning or the other. And I suddenly realized the wisdom in these communities is also the wisdom that is there in a scriptural knowledge that we have, in our history, in our folklore, in Ramayana, Mahabharata. So when I look at leadership, it was never about, the West always looks at being a leader, whereas India celebrates the exercise of leadership. We don't celebrate the individual. It's not Krishna who celebrated, it's the expression of Krishna as Bhagavad Gita that is celebrated. And I recognize most of the Western models are trait-led, behavior-led, whereas ours is kriya-led, karma-led. And the ability to transcend karma and not to get sunk in it saying, I am the one doing the karma. And that's the yoga part. And that is real leadership. So what I have tried to write here in this book that we're talking about is the Western world is about control over the outsiders. It's always about influencing others to do what you want them to do. So it's power without. Whereas we in India talk about controlling yourself. And the most powerful, whether Ramayana, Mahabharata, I quote all that in my book. But if I were to distill it out the way Kautilya distills out in Arthashastra, he said Rajadharma is not not just the 10 tenets that Yudhishthira gets from Bhishma, I've written that. But Rajadharma, he says only two things. You can call it the Prime Minister, you can call it the President, you can call him the ruler, the king, whatever the context that we have. But the responsibility of the ruler is to ensure Loka Sangraha and Yoga Kshema. Loka Sangraha is this welfare of society, and Yoga Kshema is enabling you to protecting all the securities you've gained and enabling you to acquire more securities for yourself. That covers so beautifully everything. And for that, he says the only person who is entitled to be doing this, capable of doing this, is a Raja who exercises not by heredity, but exercises Indriya Nigraha, who becomes a Indriya Vijayi, one who has complete control over his sensual organs. And that is exactly what we need today, right? What we're missing in the world today in leadership is exactly that. And for me, that is power within. And the expression of the power within, and so beautifully captured in our one Vedic statement, which is also there, which Swami Vivekananda popularized by making the mission of the Ramakrishna Ashram. He said, Atmano mokshartam jagat hitayecha. Now we all need salvation, that's the internal struggle. But the internal struggle is not for yourself, don't be selfish, he says. It should be for the jagat's hita. So the expression of the power within should be manifested as the welfare of the people outside. And that is India's leadership. And that is the Jagat Guru message we got to give. I'll stop here.
This was amazing. I think so many lessons from the indigenous to Bhagavad Gita to how the ruler should be. I think it's been a journey for you also to get till here. So if you were to compare the 9 books that you've written, so from the first book, where did it begin? Has your concepts also evolved over time with each single book and the reception that you got?
Hugely, because see, all our thinking is a product of its time. Two sentences come to my mind, and most of what I say will be Vivekananda, so you should pardon me for that. He says life is a struggle of moving from one level of truth to the next level of truth. At some point of time, we believe, I'm convinced is the truth. And then experiences, knowledge comes your way, and then you say, you go to the next level of truth. And that's a struggle, that's sadhana, that's spirituality all about, right? And Gandhi also says it in a nice way. He said, I believe then that was the truth, but today I believe this is the truth. And that's the honesty of Gandhi also. Now for me also, if I were to rewrite I the Citizen today, it will be a completely different book. The book which will not change for me too much is the book I call Voices from the Grassroots. Because those are voices of the people. I'm no longer living with the people, so I may not be able to change it much. If I go back, it will change. And the book which will definitely change is I wrote a book called Swami Vivekananda as I See Him. And unpacking Vivekananda is a lifelong struggle. And today, if I unpack him, that book will be completely rewritten. So we evolve, we grow, we understand society better, we understand ourselves better. Swadhyaya is a continuous process. And to me, today, with the opportunity to work at the national level and seeing different experiences, processing them to the lived experience of my micro experiments, looking at the stupid macro mistakes that keep happening and seeing why can't people connect. You feel angry, you feel restless, but then deep down, you understand that there is a method. And at some point of time, I think my anger and restlessness has changed completely. That's my evolution. Today, I am much more calm, peaceful, and driven with the conviction that Atma Samarpan is much more difficult and much more necessary for growth than restless, angry action.
Wow, I think these are such heavy, beautiful concepts. As one of my journey also to inspire and to match spirituality with leadership and try and evolve more than anything myself. As you pointed out, like when we grow, it's like the world around changes. What I know of is that in previous times, the ruler or the king or the institutions were closely linked with spirituality. There was a base of spirituality with ruling. These days, I see that it's a separate concept. Spirituality is different, leadership is different. Do you think in the world that we're moving into, that the marriage of leader and spirituality is important to lead in better ways, be it a family, be it yourself, or be it a country at
I would strongly advocate that. The reason I'm saying this is, we always keep, it's a dichotomy. We think spirituality is post 60 and then your struggle for understanding yourself starts much later. If at all I can call a deficiency of the education system, is not teaching our children to understand themselves. They're in a constant, and I think I would blame the entire system, parents, all of us for it. So we are constantly focusing on the outside that we don't even teach the child what to do on the inside, right? Our emotional intelligence is stupid. I look at India today. We talk of Daniel Goleman and say, what a great book he wrote, what wonderful emotional intelligence he writes about self-awareness. But he writes, I went to India and spent time discovering the Bhagavad Gita before I did my PhD. Right? When he says it, we suddenly rediscover the Bhagavad Gita. Otherwise, till then we don't. Like Steve Jobs says, I went to India and that's why I became different. But then we think, oh, it must be true. So to me, leadership is spirituality in action. And spirituality gets expressed as leadership. That's how I write. And that's because my definition of leadership is slightly different. I see leadership as understanding oneself, understanding others around me, and understanding the actions that bind the self to the others. And if these actions come from a space of niswartha karma or selflessness, that is true leadership in action, where the I is not important, but the work getting done is important. Today we have leaders who want to be seen to be doing things. But what matters is the things get done. So real leadership is being present by being present while you're absent and being absent while you're present. And that's a contradiction people can't live with. But that's very, very powerful. So we need to really see it as leadership is not separate from spirituality the way I see it. It's one continuous sadhana for all of us. Every minute of our lives is different if you live for others. So I would just say one sentence, which for me is a very powerful leadership sentence, but always seen in the context of spirituality. In a letter, Swami Vivekananda writes the Maharaja of Mysore. Maharaja of Mysore was very close to him and he gave him money to go for the Chicago thing and all that. But he writes to him, from there he writes back after his first visit. He says, my dear prince, the vanities of life are transient. But he alone lives who lives for others. The rest are more dead than alive. I think spirituality is being alive. Materialism is being dead, the way I see it. And if life is always about living for others, that's the highest expression you can think of. And then you're full of life, vibrant, and then you can face anything.
Listening to you, it's one of my wishes as well, and I'm sure a couple of us in the room would like to read more about spirituality and leadership. So in your journey, we understand Swami Vivekananda's material has really impacted you. Any other books that you've come across that you would like to recommend to the audience to read?
I think there's several, the way I see it. And it's very difficult because most of us, like for me personally, the handicap was not having mastered Sanskrit the way I would have liked to. Because most of my knowledge comes from translations or transliterations or other people's commentaries on the works. I wish I could read the original and form my own opinion. The Bhagavad Gita itself is a great place to start. Most of us don't, but if you don't see it as a religious text, don't see it as a treatise on leadership, this is a psychological treatise, a treatise to understand yourself, to become more emotionally competent. Now, the Gita is one book. Okay, let me go rewind a bit. I always see leadership is not about operating from zones of competence. That's what the West celebrates. I went to Harvard, I did an MBA, so I must be damn good. What people don't know is most people who do Harvard MBAs are also in jail. Right? We don't talk about it. Clayton Christensen himself has written about it. And that's a fact also. But we don't look at it from those perspectives because they're trained for something else. So my way of looking at it is don't classify and call it as acquisition of competence as leadership. But learning to operate in zones of incompetence, that is real leadership. And that's what the Gita prepares you for. Prepares you for that existence where you can operate in these uncertain times but with the courage and the humility to absorb knowledge all the time. And that can happen only when you're agreeing to be vulnerable enough to say, I'm incompetent in this. Then I'll seek out answers and knowledge. So spirituality is lifelong self-inquiry. And leadership is also constant self-inquiry. It's not about living in self-doubt with the importance of self-doubt, but living in self-doubt with the urgency of acquiring knowledge to fulfill that self-doubt. That's a huge difference. One is positive, one is completely negative. So the Bhagavad Gita would be one book. I would think my experiments of truth. don't even see it as Gandhi who wrote it. There's just a human being in search for struggling to discover himself. It could be you, me, all of us in different ways. If you replace the name Gandhi with your name, you're also going through the same thing. But Gandhi had the courage to tell his story in a way in which we can understand. So to me, the values that I subscribe to, which Shareen said in the introduction, Seva and Tyaga, all these four are Vedantic values. They were not given by Gandhi or Vivekananda. Vivekananda said the national ideals of India should be Tyaga and Seva. And that's why it stuck to me. And Gandhi said there are only two things for me which are spiritual, which is Ahimsa and Satya. And both are Vedantic values. If you deconstruct Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, all these four are there. Between Yama and Niyama, everything is covered. And so they distilled out portion of it in a practical application driven way. So I would recommend Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. If you can get a good translation, I go back to Vivekananda's translation as Raja Yoga, which he describes in that. Each of us may have a different context to go back to. There are also other Western books. We can't discard it. I think for me, knowledge can come from anywhere, like Gandhi said, any door, window open. So if you see my Power Within book, 50 pages of research notes are there. Maybe 50% of it is the West. For the leadership context. 50% is, I'm not saying you're bad, I'm good. I'm just saying we are better. Okay. I think Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, is a book which everybody should read. That Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, that's a book I would recommend everybody to really go through in a deep way. And each of us have different tastes, so I wouldn't keep going on. But I have a big list. I can email you if you want. Yes. But these four can change your life permanently if you have the time to actually understand the four.
Done. I know now what I'm reading next. So we've got
after you read my book.
Yes, absolutely. So we've got your journey, we've got spirituality, and we've got leadership. Now let's bring in the country, India, in the equation. You've worked with indigenous people. I believe a few of us right here are devoted to changing the country. There are some young blood in the room who are very interested in devoting themselves and their lives to changing the country for better. Since you've done so much work, you're still continuing to do work that we will see in the future, how it will impact the entire shape and experience of this country. How do you look at India, the way that it has evolved over these years?
I think India is struggling to discover its true self. It's right now a confused country. And in confusion, a lot of noise erupts. And that's normal. Even when we are confused, I think we are like Arjuna in the Vishada Yoga stage. That's okay to have confusions. Let's accept it. That's when we'll start seeking more deeper solutions. I think we are at the cusp of the change. I'm an eternal optimist. But we need to go through these ebbs and tides, because only when you go to the rock bottom can you miss the peak. And we are hitting the bottom now. Soon we'll have to start climbing up the storyline. We are discovering ourselves now. We are finding a new pride in ourselves. Whether the pride is well placed, misplaced, I think it's a different argument. But the fact that you're finding pride, we are finding pride in our languages, in our dress. Why is this Haveli so special? Right? It is discovering pride in ourselves. It's not just about India's culture and handloom and handicraft and all that. Those are just symbols of that pride. But I think the real spirit behind it, the Atma, is that discovering ourselves. It's a way of discovering ourselves, as simple as that. It's not discovering handicraft. It's actually discovering ourselves. And so to me, this is happening in a big way, but in a very unseen way. Right now, it's all over the place in different formats. We are institutionalizing it in government without any noise. You don't have to make loud noise, then only get a lot of distraction. Do it quietly and it will happen. I think 10 years later, I'm not even expecting too late, 10 years later we'll all see the noticeable difference. The younger generation today is very restless. Many people thought they're restless with wanting to know how to make money, but now they discovered they can make money being a YouTube influencer. Right? That's no big deal. They're still restless. Right? My son was joking with me and saying, I wish I had not really put so much effort into what I'm doing. Looks like being a YouTube influencer is an easy way to... So if just making money was that, I would have been that, he said. That means every young man, is just a symbol. Every young person today is in this urge for the eternal quest of discovering themselves, and money is no longer the driving force or the fulfilling force. Otherwise, that would have been easy for them. That may be one of the, they know they can always do it today. Maybe the hunger is something deeper, and that is change, beginning of change. Packaging what to feed them is going to be our biggest storyline. And we have to really, really work hard to be a generation which will be a role model to tell them what not to do at least. If not being able to say what to do, at least we should be able to tell them what not to do. At least don't imitate us. You have better things to do in life than that. And then I'm sure they'll actually outclass all of us. And I think we are a privilege, we are living in very privileged times. And to me, I interpret development differently. For me, development is not GDP, economic growth and all that. I write in my books, it's already there. I'm public vocal, very articulately explain why human development for me is just a constant expansion of human capability. So investing in human capital is what I've done all my life, and that's what I want to do on myself and everybody else around me. And I think that is real human development. And India will possibly be the world leader which will find this balance between, we'll call it ecology and economy, between profits and the planet. All that we have to do, because we have to balance. You can't say ignore money. We need food on the table too. We've got to be practical. We will be the living example. We'll build a new economic order, a life economy if you can call it that, where we'll move away from blind shareholding to a deeper stakeholding. We'll move away from profit maximization thinking to a benefit optimization thinking. And I think that is what this new generation is going to teach us. And we have to have the patience, not for too many years. I believe 8 to 10 years, we can all see it. And I only keep praying, I should live to see that.
Definitely. So the book that everyone's going to receive today, The Power Within, from all that you've said, what the reader will receive when they read through the book?
The first statement I want to make is don't judge the book by its cover. We live in a polarized world and we have to be very, very consciously open about it. The book is, it took 15 years in the making. The actual deep research on the Prime Minister Modi was 2 years. But my research on Indic thinking, scriptural wisdom, Jataka tales, Panchatantra, Mahabharata, Ramayana, all is long. It is a way of presenting India's deep knowledge of leadership in a palatable, understandable way. I have distilled, it's actually 20-25 books in one, but I just want to give the width right now before getting into the depth. But it's a very reader friendly, it's an academic exercise, but it's very practitioner sensitive. Even practitioners can use it. I got a call of all the people from Suhail Seth. I don't know who gave him a copy of the book. He somehow tracked me down, called me, I didn't know him before that. And he said, I have only one request to make. He said, I never called authors after reading their books. I normally give acidic comments, but I'm going to tell you this. Please stop calling your book a damn book. That's how he started. I thought, oh my God, this guy is going to download his acidity on me also. Then he said something very, very, very special. He said, this is the best do-it-yourself kit on leadership I ever read. So by calling it a book, you're demeaning yourself. It's a practitioner toolkit from farmers to students to political leaders to industry leaders. It's a powerful message. The first time I'm proud when I go outside, he travels a lot abroad. He says, whenever I go outside, I'm proud to say that now you know what, I have something which India can teach you, leadership. So I think that is what it is. It's a distilled out, evidentially drawn conclusion. It's not emotionally saying, oh, everything in India is great. We all end up doing that. But this is something where I'm trying to say, this is the stuff that we have. Wherever Western literature is validating it, I pointed it out so that others also, it's a global book. It's actually doing very well in the US and UK also already. India, in the last 1 month, it's already a national bestseller. That means people are recognizing it. And I have not made too much noise about the book. It's word of mouth. It's actually getting read, accepted. Academicians are calling me. Industry leaders, most of them have really said it's what a corporate leader needs today. And my book was, my research team and my reviewers around me were all very young people. And so I've been very sensitive to their inputs because this has to really reach and touch the lives of young people today. And to me, it's a labor of love. But it's not about buying the book, it's not about reading it. That's just a minor statistics. I think it's more important to the publisher that it's a national bestseller because they go by numbers. But for me, it's about discovering the power within you, and through that discovery, making life a better world, a better place. That's what I hope to achieve by that book.
Fantastic. I'm sure all of us are really excited at this point to read the book. I'm sure you have something more in the making. Just like you said, this book is 15 years. What is coming up next in terms of the next book or the next project?
You know, there is a very famous, I keep quoting this, Thomas Carlyle, I think. He says, being an author is like getting possessed. It's like a demon has possessed you. You want to get rid of the possession. You want to get the demon out of you. And then the strange part is after you get it out and write a book, you want to be possessed all over again. So when I was writing this book, I rewrote it 32 times. I was counting actually. Because I had to be very careful. It is a very balanced approach. It's not a hagiography. So I got to be very, very conscious. At the same time, I'm reporting to the man I'm writing about. Right? I'm seeing him from very close quarters. And when you're very close also, you can lose objectivity. No, and his charisma, and when you see him, when he is alone, is possibly the finest person to work with. I never worked under anybody in my life. The way my life has been structured, he's the first person I can call a boss, and I wouldn't work for anybody else after this. It's a privilege to even be reporting to him. So I watched, but at the same time, you can get bowled over by the charisma that you'll miss the objectivity. So I had to constantly straddle that mindful path where am I losing myself or am I being objective enough? Am I writing something which end of the day is not going to make an impression? I'm not here to please him or anybody in my life. I'm here to please make sure that my intellectual integrity is not compromised. At the end of the day, till last month I was still a professor at Cornell, and I hold my academic integrity at heart. And so I had to make sure of that. So at the same time, I didn't want to glorify everything Bharatiya and then say everything else is trash. Because I am educated at Harvard. My deep foundational framework thinking comes from Harvard, and I can credit it with that. At the same time, it has not given me solutions. I can also call it out. But here I'm trying to walk that balanced path. I cannot glorify spirituality. At the same time, if I don't practicalize it, it's of no use to anybody. So it was a very difficult task is what I think I have done. And till now the reviews and friends across the world who have read it think that I have done justice. Obviously there'll be purists will say this is not academic enough. Because that's what the practitioners will say, it's too academic. So finding that midpoint has been a struggle for me. But during the course of writing this book, the many personal conversations I had with the human being Modi. Because as an author, you don't meet the Prime Minister. When as a commission member, I meet the Prime Minister. But as an author, I just meet a protagonist of my book. So I have different filters. I have different liberties I can take. I don't have the constraints of protocol. And he never applied those constraints either. The conversations are a fascinating journey. And the journey was not just discovering about him things, but journey about discovering myself also through those things. And that's a different book altogether. Whether actually demon will possess me back to write it, we'll have to wait a few more years.
I'm sure we're all looking forward to see what unfolds next. Let's open the room for conversations. I'm sure everyone has a lot of questions.
Namaste.
You talked about some of the scriptures, Vedas and other books, obviously till even Vivekananda. And those are the books, those are the content which are available when you study leadership especially. I have also been studying leadership. About 7 years ago, I did a diploma where we compared the Western leadership methods with the Vedic leadership methods. And in that, the Shukraniti was one of the books, and of course the Nyaya Niti also. Chanakya Niti, of course, is the topper. So that also has been at the top. What I want to understand from you is these scriptures are not available in their original form, which you also said. So, what would be the best way to get to the root scriptures?
I wouldn't say they're not available. We have to accept what is available in the Sanskrit as close to originality. We don't know what the author wrote or meant. And Sanskrit is a language where it's such a powerful way of expressing yourself to the, I would put it this way. Sanskrit is possibly the only language which can describe reality as close to reality. Whereas every other language amplifies it or dilutes it in a way your emotion gets involved in it. But this is extremely, the closest you can describe reality is Sanskrit. That's why in this book also I have given 30 pages of my book is just glossary of Sanskrit terms, the way I have explained it as close to reality as possible. And I'm saying in that context is what I've used it in this book. So you can always have your own interpretational way of looking at it, but please look at it from my interpretation. The difficulty for me is I'm not a Sanskrit scholar. But I had the privilege of a good friend and mentee of mine who was an authority on Sanskrit, so she worked with me on getting this done. To me, the closest is there are a lot of excellent books available today where the Sanskrit is given in its original and then they give the transliteration or the explanations. If you're a Sanskrit scholar, don't go bother about the rest. If you're not, like I'm trying to learn Sanskrit, that's my next big journey for my life is to learn it as well as I can. I'm hoping that I'll have time. Now I'm not having time. If you know it, do it that way. Or if you can trust an explanation. For example, Bhagavad Gita, I only took two people's explanations. Though I read Gandhi, I read Vivekananda, I read all these people, the only two commentaries I paid attention to seriously because I thought that's the closest it is to what I wanted was Swami Chinmayanandaji's Gita. And there's one more book called Swami Chidbhavananda. He was in a private ashram in Trichy long ago, called Tapovanam. And his book is very voluminous. That is very powerful translation. For Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, I just went to Vivekananda's translation of Raja Yoga. And I just said, I'll go with this. Now we have to take a call somewhere because everybody writes a Bhashya. And the challenge with Indian scriptures is everybody seems to be an authority. For example, Ramanuja writes a commentary on the same Bhagavad Gita. Now it's a completely different school of thought, right? It's Vishishtadvaita. And Madhvacharya writes on commentary on Bhagavad Gita from the Dvaitic perspective. And Adi Shankara has also written a Bhashya on the Bhagavad Gita. Now whose Bhashya is right? Now depending on your temperament, you analyze it differently. So I decided I will not get there. I read them, but I stuck to, for my explanations, I stuck to only Chinmayananda and Chidbhavananda's work. So I would say the call is yours.
So even with Sanskrit, as many forms, the language
it is still interpretational. Because you can interpret it. See, the root meanings are there. That's why I have given the root meanings. I have not just given meaning. I have given the root of the word, etymological explanation for the Sanskrit words I have used. Therefore, allowing you the freedom to say where is the root coming from. For example, I have tried to explain Neta and Netritva. The root is the same for both. But actual root comes from vision. So the way Sanskrit word describes Netritva is for the person who can create a vision for everybody. So it's such a deep meaning. Right, its ability to, and today modern leadership talks about the first step of leadership is ability to create a vision, right? But it's embodied in a small word. It's also vision. Similarly, darshanik capacity, drishti, all those are very powerful words. Which I given all the root meanings and said, how do I see it in leadership context?
Thank you.
I'm saying long answers. I think lady there. Right.
And I would like to ask one question. When you said, like talking about Bhagavad Gita, you said when West people, they appreciate there are a lot of leadership lessons into it, right? Why not Indian schools have adapted that since beginning? Like why we are not teaching our children from beginning about Bhagavad Gita as a learning lesson for leadership? Since that has why it is taken as a spiritual book.
I think most of us have become very paranoid about our religion, especially nowadays, right? End of the day, all religions possibly say the same thing in different ways. Exactly. And Krishna himself describes it so beautifully in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, as many people, so many paths. So he doesn't say follow my path. And Krishna also gives us the freedom. The last chapter he says, well, you don't have to believe what I say. If this doesn't appeal to you, throw it out of the window, he says. He tells Arjuna, you don't accept what I'm saying. Just discard it and go with your life. That gives us the freedom to start exploring ourselves. But the tragedy is, And this is my interpretation, so you should give me that liberty. It's an opinion, I'm not saying it's out of research. See, what we inherited when we got a freedom, where whatever people say, however great they claim the constitution is today, constitution is a product of the times of thinking of people who thought through in 1947. And most of the people who crafted a constitution were all Western educated. So their model of an independent country was driven by their understanding of a constitution just borrowed from the West. And so it's not wrong, that's the context. So they never had, but Ambedkar tried to explain and say we have to root it in Indian cultural wisdom, but they didn't listen to him. We all credit him with so much, but the others didn't give him the space to say we should root it in that. Even to the point of saying Sanskrit should be a national language, that is the DNA of India. He argued it out and said why it should be that way, but I think people more powerful than him, more elitist than him, who are educated in Oxford and other Cambridge, said that no, it should be this way. So they shaped the nation in its infancy to start not just believing in what the Western narratives are, which may not be wrong, but they created a narrative disbelieving what our traditionality was. And that I think was a great mistake we made. A balance of both would have been good enough. There's nothing wrong in learning from others, but discarding your strength. So to me, for me today, I think in English. I don't know if it's a curse or a blessing. It's a blessing when I teach at Harvard or Cornell. But it's a curse because it comes in the way of my interpreting my cultural basis. And it's something which is very powerful. And it was so beautifully explained by Abhay, right? He said it so beautifully. He said language is what is the cargo ship. The cargo is held together by language called the ship. And to me, it was a very powerful expression. And we have lost that capacity today because we have not been trained to think. Because we have to think, and because that gives an advantage. We can always master English. It's a beautiful transactional tool. But we have discarded the past. I used to be a prolific writer in Kannada. But my mother tongue is Tamil. And I refused to learn Tamil. Because I never took pride in it. And there's nothing wrong. You can take pride in every damn thing. Today I feel it's a little late for me. So I think all this instance put together is we have trained ourselves to believe that whatever Indian is not good enough. And what shaped my conviction in this thinking is what Vivekananda wrote 120 years ago. He said, an Indian child with a high school education is trained to believe everything Indian is dirty, everything in India is bad, all our Indian thinking is all to be thrown out of the window. He said education is the bane of a system, we should do something about it. By then India's maculaized and all that was already happened. So to us today, I think that's why I see NEP is a very powerful tool we have. Forget the politics of it. Just look at the policy. I'm a policy analyst. I'm trained in public policy. My way of looking at it is just take the policy. Discard who brought it in, who's the politician behind, what does it matter to us? Our nation is more important. And take the good out of it. Obviously 100% can't be good in anything, right? And take the best and then we can solve this. Today if I say Bhagavad Gita, they'll say you're saffronizing. In my book, I have quoted books which I have read. Doesn't mean books I have not quoted are not good enough. I have quoted from Jainism, I have quoted from Buddhism. Those are things I have read, so I know about it. I have not read the Quran, I have not read the Bible at the depth I can write about it. That doesn't mean they don't carry excellent messages for us. So to me, I am open-minded to say I have not read them, so I don't know. These I have read and so I can talk about it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Dr. Balu, for a fascinating and lovely session. On behalf of the Prabha Khaitan Foundation, I, Shaneel Parekh, would like to express my sincerest gratitude, Dr. Balu, and Ehsaas Woman Priyanshi Patel for a very scintillating conversation and leading it so well. We had a great evening. Today's event is in collaboration with Karma Foundation and House of MG. A big gratitude to Shree Cement Limited and Ehsaas Women of Ahmedabad. A mosaic of cultures is the backbone of India, and Prabha Khaitan Foundation supports this rich cultural heritage across India's diverse states. Highlighting the relevance of the same, today we are pleased to felicitate the ethnic dupatta of Kantha Uttoriyo, to Dr. Subramaniam. Kantha is a centuries-old tradition of stitching patchwork cloth from rags, which evolved from the thrift of rural women in Bengal region of the subcontinent. It can be traced back to 500 years as a way the Bengalis recycled old saris, dhotis, and household textiles. By using the Kantha technique, they upcycle their old textiles into quilts for warmth and comfort. I would like to call upon Shraddha ji now to felicitate Dr. Balasubramaniam. Thank you everyone again for coming. Hope to see you all again in our forthcoming events. Now Dr. Balu will sign a copy for all of you. Thank you again.